All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Connections. Air, what's up, man? How you doing?
Not too much, not too much. I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks, man. Well, thanks for jumping on. So, like I said, we were talking before. I've been following your work for quite a while, whether that's on Twitter or the blog posts, and of course, like your book that I've recently read. But maybe for the folks, listening and watching, how would you even define yourself? I guess, do you feel like you're an author first, an investor first? Like, what do you kind of identify as professionally?
I don't know. I have a hard time with that. I just kind of follow my curiosity, and that ends up, like writing and sharing and meeting people
Hmm.
and investing. Is a really interesting kind of like mental pursuit and just
Hmm.
high leverage activity.
Hmm.
And yeah, I found I was lucky to learn pretty early. I think that like when you share the stuff you're interested in and
Hmm.
talk about it, you end up kind of holding up a flag, and like people
Right.
come find you and they're like, oh, that's a cool idea. I'm interested in that too. And
Right.
um, I mean, it's really like started as a small snowball that's just kind of, I've always found encouragement and excitement and reason to kind of keep sharing and keep exploring new
Hmm.
stuff. And um, I probably could be more organized about it, but like as soon as I share whatever I'm interested in, like,
Right.
I kind of find a new path forward and new people to talk to about it with.
I love it. I mean, and I think that's honestly like a way to live too. Because I think I've said this before. Too many of us, I think, get in the path like I'm an accountant, so I'm only going to like stay in the lane of like this. Like we almost like, I think the schooling system almost kind of creates that. Like you come out of college, even if you have an engineering degree, you might not be an engineer. Maybe you use those engineering skills to like further, whatever it may be in startup. Which kind of segues me to my question on your thoughts on traditional, I guess, education, because a lot of what you speak about seems to me from reading it and being like a reader and viewer of it are concepts, ideas, and philosophies that are like they feel so natural and human and fundamental to like wealth and business and whatnot. But that's not, I guess, necessarily what you get typically from like college or education. Do you think that like the old methods of like education are maybe going to like transition out of this, like the more like access I guess we have to folks like yourself and even just independent creators like sharing their life's work in that manner? I'm just interested in your kind of perspective on that.
Yeah. It's an interesting kind of, I don't know, almost philosophical question.
Right.
And I'm not sure, these are unformed thoughts for me, so I'm happy to kind of share them and talk through with you.
Please.
But I don't know that this is not a strong opinion that I have. I think
Right.
when I was younger, I was very like critical of the kind of established education system, and I'm not
Hmm.
sure that that was fair. I think I was expecting it maybe to do everything for me, and it
Right.
doesn't, and it's not designed to, and that's kind of okay. Like it's perfectly
Right.
fine. Um, but when you expect it to do everything for you and rely on it to do everything for you, and then it doesn't, and you either don't know or don't know that it's not going to deliver everything
Right.
for you, or don't know that you have to go out on your own and kind of figure some of this out. Um, so I think the way I look at it now is just encouraging high agency and understanding like what the traditional education system delivers and doesn't deliver.
Hmm.
And what I find sort of interesting, and I guess maybe this is a way to classify my work, but is like trying to help people understand the things that traditional education doesn't. And that doesn't mean that
Mm.
traditional education should. It just means that like
Right.
that's where I thrive and what's interesting to me. And um, like I think it's a Michael Burry was like, there's no school that can perfectly teach you investing. Like if
Right.
they did, tuition would be infinitely high and like
Right.
the wait line would be out forever. And I think that's true of a lot of things, either because it's very personal or because it's very nuanced or because it's changing so fast that like
Hmm.
you just can't expect to walk into a classroom and sign up for a class and like get taught how to be a world-class investor or a
Right.
world-class writer even.
That's, yeah.
So there's just an amount of self education that you have to be responsible for, no matter who you are and what you're doing, or even
Hmm.
what your job is, I think. um, and it's a very different pursuit. Like being a good self educator is very different from being a good academic student.
Test taker or
um,
something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. um, and there's a little bit of a threshold that people cross when they realize that, I think, and
Hmm.
just kind of like, oh man, I'm gonna have to become a lifelong learner.
Right.
And that is probably the closest thing to like a label that my mental tribe has, is like,
Right.
I understand that I have to be a lifelong learner, and I'm excited to be one. And like that takes a lot of forms, for all of us, kind of in different directions and different platforms and different interests. But that's something I can always identify with.
and keeping your curiosity, right? Like you said, like earlier, it's like it's hard to say like what necessarily like defining yourself as like one job. I think the more you, if you think about yourself in terms of just like, hey, look, I'm interested in this, I'm going to learn about this, and maybe one day if that makes me money, and maybe one day if it doesn't, so be it. But at least I think just like accepting, I guess, that you're going to have like a diverse set of interests and business interests and whatnot. Which kind of, I mean, the quote sticks out to me from the book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, is that to the keys to wealth, one of them is being a perpetual learner. I mean, clearly you're a fan of Naval. You accumulated this amazing book. You got Tim Ferriss to write the forward of it. How did that come about? Maybe what were your initial? How did you come aware of Naval, and then what was that like, kind of working through his all of his life's work and accumulating such a great book?
Yeah, I think, I mean, by another kind of stroke of luck, I was introduced to Naval pretty early in my life. I grew up in Michigan. I was actually at a startup weekend in Detroit, and somebody
Okay.
was like, if you want to get to Silicon Valley and you want to understand what the Silicon Valley ethos and world is all about, then like
Yeah.
go read every post on Venture Hacks, which is Naval and Nivi's blog,
Okay.
and go read everything that Paul Graham has ever written. And I was like, okay, like here I go. And so from the first context, he was kind of held up as like somebody who was broadcasting and writing and sharing things that would help you kind of get your head into the Silicon Valley ethos and ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he didn't have a big following then at
Mm-hmm.
all. But I always appreciated, he was very, contrarian's an overused word, but like an independent thinker, and
Right.
like not necessarily just kind of parroting whatever the Valley trope was at the time, but like
Right.
really kind of examining things and doing things differently enough to be kind of an interesting experiment. And so I followed him for a long time and listened to podcasts and talks and um, things that he was sharing. And the book came about in, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. He did an interview with Shane Parrish on the Knowledge
Mm-hmm.
Project, which was a really exceptional interview. And I listened to it 3 or 4 times, and I thought there was just so much incredible kind of timeless wisdom in this.
Yeah.
And podcasting is such a, it's huge, but it's also kind of a weird subculture. Like there are people who just don't do podcasts, right?
Right.
Or don't do Twitter. Um, but like everybody knows what to do with a book. It's searchable, it's indexable, it's this kind of
Right.
timeless, permanent medium that's very accessible and giftable and viable. And everybody knows what to do with a book. And so
Right.
I've always been a bit of a curator and a organizer and editor. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of threw this idea out there and, very half-assed, like joking offhanded way. And Naval retweeted it and 5,000 people were like, hell yeah, like we want this. I was like, oh,
Like,
okay, I guess here we go. And then it consumed 3 years of my life, and here we are now with the finished product. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun to do. And, it's a very weird how it came about. It was not very intentional.
right. It's
But
pretty unique too. I
worked
don't.
out.
I mean, like the way. I mean, his taking his work and like you get full in the beginning of it. You're like, hey, look, I'm. I think you said like all brilliance is Duvall, all mistakes are mine.
Yeah.
Um, and then, but then you get Tim Ferriss to write the forward. Like, what was that like? I mean, you just kind of said like, hey, I mean, he obviously maybe is a fan of Duvall as well. Just working with him, obviously, he's known as someone who's a free thinker, as a just someone who's like again the same things we're talking about, perpetually curious and whatnot. Um, Getting him to write it, how was that? Just you kind of just reached out to him and said, hey man, like, would you be willing to do this? Or
I can't take much
easy?
credit for that, honestly. I mean, I know, I think it really has a lot more to do with Tim and Naval's relationship, which is,
Right.
they've been friends for a long time. And I mean, Tim wrote in the foreword, like, I really have wanted a Naval, like a relic of
Right.
Naval, a book to be done for a long time. And I think, um, yeah, I think they have a great, kind of mutual friendship, relationship, respect that
Mm-hmm.
is kind of tangible in their interviews and stuff like that. And yeah, it was a very, I'm super grateful for him doing that, but it's also kind of a weird project. Like,
Right.
the book is available for free online to anybody in the world. The whole thing's posted on the website. You can download digital versions for free.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tim pretty famously like does not do forewords, and this is just like a
Yeah.
weird enough project that um, was part of a close enough friend of his that I think um, it shook it up a little bit. Like if this was the Almanac of Eric Jorgensen, like there is no
Mm-hmm.
chance that it would have a Tim Ferriss forward. So
Right.
I have no secrets there.
Right. Yeah, man, I like it. And then like Talk to me about the concept, kind of like diving a little bit deeper about leverage. Let me like pull up one because I just actually read one of your tweets. It's you can't preemptively build leverage, or you can preemptively build leverage without knowing how you're going to use it. Like audience, credibility, savings, portfolio connections are all useful in almost any kind of future goal. I don't think a lot of people think about that in terms of like leverage. Maybe I'll let you define it how you see it, because I think most people think of just their career and life as just like earn income. Is it earning me money now? Is it going to earn me money in the future? Not necessarily this like concept of like building leverage in your life. Maybe if you want to expand on that, and how did you kind of come to? Because I love, I mean, the tweet's very concise and it makes perfect sense to me. But maybe expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, so leverage is a little bit of, I don't know, it can be a confusing word for people because there's financial versions and then there's kind of the
Right.
connotation of like to get leverage over someone. And this is neither of those, right? This
Right.
is the mental model that starts with the simple machine from physics.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get a lever that's 2x longer on one arm, you can lift 2x the weight with 1x the effort. And it's one of those things that like we all kind of take for granted in our everyday life, right? Like a lever is the paddle of a kayak. A lever is how you open a pop can. It's how you like pull a nail out of a board. Uh,
Right.
it's how you jack up a car. But like, it's kind of a tiny little miracle in the same way that like compounding like blows your mind when you actually think about what happens
Right.
over 20 years of compounding returns. Um, and so when you abstract the physics mental model into your daily life and your work, and you think about um, you basically reorient your thinking around like how do I increase my effort to output ratio,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's the fundamental kind of art of it is like how do I accomplish more? How do I
Right.
spend this hour such that it saves me 10 hours in the future or it accomplishes 10 hours worth of work? And I think this podcast is a really good example, right? Like one of the whole I kind of break leverage into four main categories, and one
Mm-hmm.
of them is product, which is like preserving your effort or judgment or experience into a product, usually
Mm-hmm.
whether that's a file of code, a book, a
Right.
recording, podcast, something like that. And so we're going to spend 30 minutes, an hour here or whatever, and then 100 people, 1,000 people maybe are going to listen to it, whether that's in parallel or over a year into the future. And so in 1 hour, maybe 5 hours of total effort with editing and everything like that,
Right.
we've got a 200x return on that time if 1,000 different people listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really, in some ways we're surrounded by it and it's a little bit obvious, but it is a tiny little miracle. And there's people
Right.
who are making deliberately leverage decisions, and they're doing leverage work, and over time, in the same way that somebody with a good savings rate and a good rate of return, that compounds into incredible outcomes. People who are
Right.
doing leverage work compound into incredible accomplishments. And so if you look at somebody like James Clear is a good example, who's been like writing very consistently for a very long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, like, it seems like he's an overnight success with 1 million, people on his
Right.
newsletter and a book that sold millions of copies. But really, like, he did highly leveraged work. He preserved his judgment. He wrote, he shared, he built an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And he took the time to very carefully build leverage over time until now, 1 hour of his effort, one tweet that he sends reaches orders of magnitude more people than you
Right.
or I reach, because he has more leverage. But he built that himself very deliberately over time
Mm-hmm.
using that mindset. So what I've tried to do, in my writing and sharing in this course is like kind of first help people understand that mindset, and then understand what kind of work that is and what it looks like and what it feels like and when you're doing it and when you're not doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
then some frameworks for decision making and kind of mapping out your leverage and finding bottlenecks. Usually people are very skilled at one or two, but like totally blind or have mental blockers about using one or two. They're really good with
Right.
code, but they don't know how to hire somebody. They're really they have a great aptitude with tools, but they're not really sure how to invest capital in getting tools or people. Or yeah, it's very interesting to see the personalities and how they shake out.
Right. Which and kind of it brings me to like you mentioned a good point. Like if you don't know how to do something, the importance of finding someone who does, and it kind of ties
Mhm.
into like networking and whatnot. Like just the value of the relationships that you've built and the professional collaboration over time. It tends to help your career. It might not help you right now, but tends to work out knowing certain people in certain areas. Obviously, for a financial advisor, it's important for me to know CPAs, lawyers, real estate agents. These people are, like you said, kind of like the hidden economic value, my leverage force to be able to maneuver and move around my career. I think it's just an important point. And it kind of like with social media, almost like how much do you value social media? Like, do you give a shit about like followers? I mean, you've built like a viewership and a readership, but like, how do you view in terms of like this like influencer culture that we all just have been thrust into? I mean, I'm 26, kind of like almost grew up with it on the perfect
Mhm.
wave of like Facebook, Instagram. For business purposes, it's clearly leverageable in terms of almost like removes a gatekeeper. Maybe I don't need a publisher. I can speak directly to the people that care about me, follow me. How do you think though that impacts us going forward? Or do you have any kind of thoughts on it? What it plays out to be 5, 10 years from now?
Yeah, it's
I know
interesting.
it's a broad question, but
It's a broad question. It's a very interesting phenomenon that means something like a little different to everybody, I think.
yeah.
And I'm kind of two maybe like seemingly opposite opinions, which is like I treat Twitter's where I hang out most of the time.
Hmm.
But like I treat it kind of like my living room. Like I'm not trying to build a very specific brand. I'm sharing the stuff that I'm interested in. I'm cracking jokes. I share like pictures of my
Yeah.
sandwiches,
Right.
and like just want to make it fun. I do want to provide value and be useful for people and like share things that kick off interesting conversations and help me learn
Hmm.
and help others learn. So on that side of things, like I don't take it too seriously as a business tool.
Hmm.
Um, I guess I should say like I don't take it like overly, but it does have a crazy high impact, and I am at the same time
Right.
like aware of the responsibility that comes with having 40,000 followers,
Right.
and like you want to be careful with that responsibility.
Hmm.
Um, and it does, I respect what it means, which is that like this rather large number of people like has at least some interest in the things that I'm saying and some faith that I'm going to give them like something interesting or at least something funny
Right.
on a like semi-frequent basis. Um, but I try not to over engineer anything.
Right.
So yeah, and I think it can get tiresome for people who do over engineer it, like tiresome to do and tiresome to receive as a
Right.
reader. And I just try to like, I think over the long haul, like the more natural and honest you are, like
Hmm.
the more resilient you are. You might grow a little slower
Right.
than somebody who's like got a super focused message that they just like hammer over and over and over and over again.
Right.
But that gets old for them and for people following. So
Right.
um, I don't know. That's as close as I have to
Yeah.
like a formed thought.
It's tough. I know I'm asking like vague philosophical questions, but to me, it's like I've always like like being on LinkedIn, being like I just saw it quickly a couple of years ago. It's like, hey, if I'm just not using this as just a direct like sales, like hammering people for 15-minute phone calls, but rather put out content relating to financial planning, that's inherently going to associate me with the service. I don't know when that person might need me, but if they do, boom, I'm the top of their mind, that sort of thing. But to me, it's like always important to not become like a caricature of yourself. Like you don't want to be a caricature of Eric and start
Yeah.
saying things that feels like what an author, investor, entrepreneur kind of would say. So I always like almost like force like check myself to, like you said, not take it too seriously and also not being afraid to be vulnerable in a way and genuine in a way that people know it's like actually that person. You're not just kind of like running this like facade of like a personality, because I think over time people can kind of smell that and see right through it, which obviously is not good.
Yeah. I think I mean, that's my approach with, me as a personal individual, which like
Right.
some people are building anonymous profiles
Right.
or company brands. And that's like kind of a different thing that maybe has different rules. Um, but I have more fun and you don't have to like put on a mask. You just kind of like show up as you and
Right.
share what you're interested in. And I don't know, that's the kind of giant global scaled living room I'm interested in.
Right. I like it. Let me ask you this too. So, do you think everybody should be an entrepreneur? Because it seems like there's just like in our society, there's just like pressure now. I think you're seeing a lot of, especially younger kids, it's like almost like a pressure to be like earning income. Like like all these like Instagram and stuff. It feels like there's a culture of like, if you're not earning 11 sources of income before you're 22, you've done something wrong. Do you think, is that just society because we're in just like not a frothy market environment, but I think Gary Vaynerchuk speaks a lot about this. Like when we have a downturn, it's going to like stamp some people, I think, out of this, whatever you want to call it, like entrepreneurship, hustle porn type stuff. But at the same time, it's never been easier, I think, to be an independent operator and like less gatekeepers to like building a successful life, however you define that. But what's your thoughts on that? And it's like, or is it, in terms of like 9 to 5s versus trying to be this like do it myself kind of personality and business person?
Um, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think it all starts from self knowledge, right? Like there are plenty of great jobs out there and great people doing great jobs, and
Hmm.
it takes a long time to kind of learn enough of the world and enough of yourself to know what's a good fit for you.
Right.
And I think there's people probably on both sides of that fence that are on the wrong side for them and that they'll figure out eventually. You know,
Right.
there's people who value entrepreneurship and like look up to it, but it's not right for them, and they
Right.
will find their way maybe out of that eventually.
Yeah.
And on the other side, there's people who like think the right thing to do is to go get a job, or are just like not yet confident enough to like or haven't built their book of business or built their
Hmm.
skills or whatever. Like entrepreneurship has a time and a place in your life where it's more likely to be successful, and I think that's,
Right.
there's people who are very thoughtful about that, and it's totally a fair approach. um, there's no right answer. There's no right answer for anybody but you. That right answer can change over time. um, I think maybe some of what you mentioned in the beginning of people like, I think crazy hustle porn and like wild algorithmic things and like this phenomenon where people are constantly bragging about how much they're making, or
Right.
like the algorithms feed that to you, and
Right.
you constantly see like the most outsized outcomes,
Right.
and that leads to these kind of like crazy misaligned expectations and a supernatural level of desires that are sometimes
Mm-hmm.
conflicting and like wild, and
Right.
like learning to recognize that and not let it affect your psychology and not let it affect your decisions.
Mm.
And um, I think that's helpful. So yeah, there's definitely like, it's definitely possible to over focus on that and over prioritize and forget
Right.
some of the other values, you know, some of the other valuable things in life, like your health or your
Right.
family or your friendships or your community or whatever those things are. And people will go through those phases and eventually find those other things rewarding also, or more rewarding.
Hmm.
Um, but sometimes you got to go all in on something for a while to like
Right.
figure out what that's like. So yeah, no, I don't pass judgment on it, but I know I've seen it enough of those stories to
Right.
see how it evolves over time.
Right. To me too, it's always like I try to, like you said earlier, to try to be as genuine as possible. Because I think it would be it's the worst thing you could be would be like a nice, cool person on the internet and then be like an asshole in real life. And
Yeah.
I just think it's like business gets more intertwined with like digital like stuff. It's like if you're acting like you're not someone, or even just your work is not who you truly want to be, that it leads to a bad place. And in my opinion.
And
Um,
and it's a long game, right? Like
right.
people figure that out like pretty quick.
Yeah.
I mean, you see people with like slippery, crazy click funnels and like really heavy converting copy and over optimized stuff. And it's like, yeah, you might have a better conversion rate on that page, but like you're going to lose trust with
Over
people.
time. Yeah.
And yeah, like, you can fool people once, but like that's not going to happen again. And what really matters is like whether you feel good about the value that you're delivering and whether you're getting like great. I mean, to me, my favorite thing is like very well articulated, like high impact qualitative feedback.
Hmm.
Well, like I know that this was like just a blog post to you, but like it totally changed my approach to work. And like I think you're going to save me like thousands of dollars this year. I was like, great,
Right.
like that's
It's
awesome.
amazing.
That
Yeah, it's incredible.
that one of those emails is worth
Right.
10,000 page views. Um, so and that person, it just has a very different relationship with like my work and my effort now. And
Right.
I don't know, I find that super rewarding.
Yeah, no, I mean, and like you said, just some like one person saying like, "Wow, like this is amazing," or like they end up like sharing something with you, like how incredible that is, knowing that you're like impacting real lives.
Sure, yeah,
Um,
I'm sure it's the same for you in the financial services world, right?
mhm,
Like you can rack up a lot of page views that don't mean much,
right,
or you can like sit across the table from one or two people a day and like see the relief in their face when like you help them through a problem.
right.
Um,
Like you can retire, like holy shit,
yeah,
like I can like we can have that farm and wherever, like
yeah, yeah. I mean, some of the happiest people I know. This is kind of a weird thing, but some of the happiest people I know are like plumbers and electricians and like house cleaners and people who just like their job is to just go like to 3 or 4 houses a day and
mhm,
solve an overwhelming problem for like a very reasonable amount of money. And
yeah,
just like when you can go into somebody's house and solve the biggest stressor in their life in that day and like get a hearty handshake and a warm smile on the way out, like
right.
that's awesome. That feels so good. And like those of us who spend a lot of time on the internet, like you can get some really big numbers that don't feel nearly as good as some of those like just warm one-to-one interactions.
Right. And I think too with COVID, I mean, maybe we've even like come to appreciate that type of stuff even more, man. Like, I mean, like I think everyone,
Hmm.
if you're fortunate enough to not have been like directly impacted, like, maybe you caught the illness or someone passed away, unfortunately. Like, if I think a lot of us can take a silver lining that, like, man, like we're gonna really appreciate like a damn hand, like a handshake or hanging out with like, like your
Yeah.
grandpa and stuff like that. I think it really did wake a lot of people up. Obviously you don't want to say like we needed that because that kind of discredits people that suffered from it, but like to a degree I think a lot of people took it as an opportunity to look inward and maybe reorganize, maybe repivot how they view life and work. And I mean it changed all kinds of human behaviors, and who knows, I guess, like what the shakeout of this will be in the next 3 to 4 years. Is there anything profound that you found like yourself? Did you during COVID remote work life, did it shift your thinking in terms of how you operate and what you're going to do moving forward?
It did feel like it felt a little good to be like united as a species against a challenge, right? Like
Right.
it didn't last super long. It didn't last the whole pandemic, probably. Like we found
Toilet
ways to
paper
start
crisis.
arguing with
Yeah.
each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it did for at least a few kind of weeks or months early on. It had the like I always dream of an alien invasion to like unify humanity and just like
Right.
get us to stop arguing with each other. But it kind of felt like that. And there was this return to kind of like wholesome activities of people like spending time with family, spending time at home, going for
Right.
walks, baking bread and playing card games.
Right.
And it was a reminder of the simple pleasures. And, I think it was a pattern interrupt for the hustle porn and the stress of daily life, and a reminder of all the things that are really important, which is our health and our relationships and our communities.
Right. Yeah, you would think maybe if we have aliens land that like Republicans and Democrats, like I wouldn't surprise me if they're like debating about what to do like in Congress. Like,
Oh no, the spaceship is blue, this is not
right.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's true, man. Well, look, man, I hate to cut it short, but I do like to keep these nice and concise, man. But look, I appreciate your thoughts on. I know we kind of touch on a wide range of both philosophical and then super tactical stuff. But I certainly appreciate your work. I'm gonna keep following you and keep subscribing to your work, and I appreciate you coming on here, man.
Of course. Yeah. I hope it helps. And I hope you continue to find whatever I'm curious about interesting as I, as I share it. I
Awesome,
appreciate
man.
you having me on. This is a lot of fun.